Welcome to the Art of Divergence podcast. I'm Sammy, and I'm joined by my colleagues Allie and Heather, as well as Lawrence Harris. Today, we're going to be sharing part 3 of our interview with Lawrence. Parts 1 and 2 can be found in our previous episodes. The information provided in this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not replace mental health treatment or therapy. Especially when it comes to neurodivergent people getting overwhelmed with new things, new tasks, having some hangups about starting a new practice or getting into emotion, like getting into deep emotions or trying to describe themselves. A lot of things with neurodivergence can be overwhelming, of course, but specifically, do you feel like as you're trying to advise people through the barriers to just getting started, what are some maybe self-talk things that we can use as we're trying to get started with journey? Anybody can adapt and tell themselves to kind of take the pressure off, take the overwhelm off. What do you say in your mind as you're trying to get yourself to work through resistance of journaling?
The word you use, resistance, just made me think about resistance in general. Because what I'm about to say applies to pretty much starting anything. So when you want to first start journaling or any new hobby or thing you consider beneficial, we make it so serious in our head. We make it out as if I have to write a novel. I have to write like a 18th century love letter to my wife as I'm going off to the war. We make it so big in our head. And one of the ways to make it less big, bad, and scary is either you can just set a 3-minute timer. And you can say, I mean, not to do this for 3 minutes. But if 3 minutes is scary, set it for 30 seconds and just write the day. And you're like, wait, I did something, so it's not that big, bad, and scary. Or what I used to do is I would make like a character in my head who was a philosopher. And I would pretend to be him, and I'm writing one of those like scrolls. And doing that, now it's like, it's not me having to do this big, serious thing. It's an imaginary character. I've recently learned about a study where they did that on children, where they gave kids like really hard problems to solve, and the kid would give up after like 5 minutes. But they told one of the kids to pretend you're Batman, and that kid spent 30 minutes trying to do the task.
That is so cool. That actually brings up a tip like an ADHD tip I just heard that I have been trying to see if I can like describe and replicate and see if it might be beneficial for me is like when you are trying to lock in and focus on something, putting yourself into like, I have to write emails or I have to do documentation. So I'm now my secretary and I'm going to be doing secretary work for the next, half hour. And then I will clock out as my secretary and then I will become, my reader and I will read myself a book and like kind of, giving yourself little jobs or like personifying like characters out of the tasks that you need to do. So I love that you brought that up. That's really interesting. And it's a creative approach too that helps to make a novel dynamic experience. Because if we know anything about neurodivergent people is that we need novelty, we need dynamics, we need dopamine out of an experience and something that really like pulls us in and keeps us engaged. And so when we think of journaling and it feels overwhelming or maybe boring or maybe like we are, going to have to feel this pressure, this perfectionism to do too much or, make it a big thing. Scaling back and allowing ourselves to find out what we can enjoy or benefit from in the system and, not putting as much pressure on ourselves to make it perfect. I think your style of journaling really helps with that. I'm hearing a lot about the time limits, and I love that because sometimes cutting ourselves off from something just helps to naturally decrease the overwhelm and the demand load that we're trying to combat as we try to get into something new or something that we perceive as challenging. So I do think even 30 seconds, 30 seconds of just jotting stuff down could be really helpful. Just like clear that bar of entry, get into it, and start seeing how it feels. So all great points. You're giving us such great advice. So many good things for listeners to adapt and go on and try. Things that I'm going to try for sure. Allie or Heather, do you have any other questions on your mind or things that have come up so far?
Bringing it back around to people and individuals who struggle with expressing their emotions or maybe don't have the vocabulary, right? Maybe they are not as well educated and don't have the word bank, or maybe they are from a different culture, and those things mean different things. I think something that's universal, kind of going back to that drawing, if you will, it gives that sense of a universal language when we're drawing something. I know, like, when I'm personally using it, if I run out of the words to say, and, for example, there was a period a couple years back where I was just like, I don't feel like I fit in, right? My neurodivergence is very specific, and I'm having a really hard time making friends, connecting with people. And so I drew this picture of basically outer space, right? I'm this alien, kind of putting it into this perspective. I'm flying in this spaceship, and Earth is going to be home, but I'm like, where? I don't fit here. Right. And so I'm like making this narrative up in my head. And it's like, okay, well, just because I'm not necessarily making those connections doesn't mean there's not other little aliens out there. Right. And so that kind of like turned it for me, where I had something that was kind of fun to think about these little aliens flying around. Right. And you're going to, meet, like, come in peace. You're going to meet up with these other little aliens, right? And you're going to have this vibe and this bond. And something I always tell my clients, it's going to happen when it's the right time. If it's not happening, it's because you're not in the right place to hear it and to do anything about it. That whole process of time will tell kind of rings true, in the sense of when you've done some healing, when you've done some work, then you're kind of in that place of, now I can see what the universe was trying to tell me, even though it took so many years. So I think that is a common language that a lot of people can use. And again, we talked about how things can feel scary or big. And so sometimes just having that activity that doesn't feel threatening, doesn't feel invasive, but is getting some things out that maybe you're not even realizing, can be a key piece to journaling as well. And I've tried to incorporate that more with the clients that I see, because a lot of the time we talk about emotions and they're like, ooh, like, we don't go there. We don't talk about that stuff. You don't have to talk about it. Draw it. Use colors. Darker colors, maybe you're angry. Blues, cooler colors, maybe you're feeling a little sad.
That actually is a really interesting way of putting it, because I also think like heavily in pictures. So when I'm talking, I'm often trying to translate this image of things into words. Like, as you were describing that, I kind of imagined someone, because I describe it to people like this, where you're on an island by yourself and you're looking out at people on their islands, and everyone had these boats and they're all connected with one another, but you're not sure how to get in and connect with them, because it's as if we speak the same language, but we don't speak the same language. And it's hard to find your people, but they exist somewhere. And it can get really frustrating to try to find them, but you also get in this duality of, you feel frustrated trying to always go out and find people you relate to, but you know that if you don't go try to put yourself out there, they're probably not going to find you, because I can't find my people if I never step out the house. You're frustrated by trying to find them. And every time you meet someone and you think that this might be one of my people, it's not. And you kind of just have to keep
Yeah, like it's a
trusting the process,
yeah. You kinda lock
even when the
yourself into
process
this
isn't
cycle of,
exactly helping.
yeah, not having the ability to get yourself out of that social anxiety versus lonely, or social anxiety and loneliness cycle that keeps perpetuating with all of that overwhelm that it takes to find those people. And I think also bringing it back to journaling in that way, defining yourself helps to define what you want to look for in other people. So getting to know yourself better through journaling, I think it can also just be like self-narrative. I've been talking a lot with clients about self-narrative lately, about how do you narrate your life? What do you know about yourself? How do you describe going through the situations you experience? And, what do you know to be true about your thoughts and feelings? How does it sound when you are saying, I think, feel, and am these ways? And do you actually know? If someone asked you to clearly say those words, would you have the language, and would you have a coordinated idea of what all of that was? So, working on self narrative then helps you translate that out into I know myself now, I kind of know who I want to gravitate towards. And I can describe that for myself in a way that helps me understand it's a priority for me to kind of combat that anxiety and get to those people, because maybe what I know about myself is I really value connectedness and community. So if I can define that about myself, it's a lot less likely that I'm going to let that social anxiety win every single time. And it's a lot less likely that I will avoid strategies and tools that will help me lower that social anxiety. And I think, especially with journaling, sometimes that can be a connector for people. You can, you can start a group or, collective journaling effort where you and friends journal. Not that you have to like share, but that you maybe connect for journaling time, that you call up a friend for, 20 minutes a day and you guys kind of sit and journal on FaceTime. Sometimes, that's like a body doubling thing where you can create some accountability between you and another person. So I think that helps in a lot of ways define how we seek connectedness, how our brain works, how we understand ourselves, and, how we translate that out. So thank you for helping us navigate that. And thank you for all of the really helpful things that we've learned from you today about journaling. I'm wondering, is there any points you'd like to leave us with, any things that you think are really helpful to get us started, and action items to take with us after this conversation?
The first thing I would say is the more you understand yourself, the more you'll be able to understand other people, because as different and diverse as we are, we're also a lot more similar than we think we are. It's kind of paradoxical because you would think that you and somebody who grew up in the middle of China are very different people, but you're a lot more similar than you think you are. And in order for you to be a good friend to other people, you have to be a good friend to yourself. And journaling helps you to sit down and get to know the friend in the mirror. Now, action items would firstly, the first step is acquire a journal. You can go down to your nearest dollar store, Amazon, anywhere that sells school supplies has a notebook and pens. And you just sit with it and you write. It's if you want to make it very simple and easy for yourself, you can look up journal prompts on the internet. Like, you just find one that you're like, oh, this sounds pretty nice. I'll write about this. Would you rather be a pirate or a Navy SEAL, and why? And you might write about that for 15 minutes and realize that I'd rather be a Navy SEAL because I love structure, or I'd rather be a pirate because I love novelty seeking and seeing new places of the globe and doing as I please. So, put simply, get a journal. You can pick a color, a texture, whichever one you like, and find a prompt, or you just say, January 1st, today, the first day I started journaling. I don't know what's going to happen, but something's going to happen. And then you just find a time of day you want to do it. Find a place you might enjoy doing it. You can make it as structured or as free-flowing as you want.
Amazing. I will try my best to adapt that myself as well. I literally have my journal right here. I thought, hey, maybe getting a beautiful leather journal that has it's got little inserts you can switch out when you're done. That wasn't that wasn't a motivator enough. So I'm going to try the structure thing next. I'm going to pick a time of day, especially with my partner, because we want to journal together. I'm going to pick a time of day and see if that helps me to maybe lower some of the overwhelm and, avoidance I've been feeling on it. So thank you. I think a lot of this is going to help me personally and a lot of us.
Agreed.
Guys, any last points you would like to hit before we end our conversation and say goodbye today?
For me, I just wanted to say thank you. I really appreciate you coming on here and sharing this and giving us a perspective that I think it's fair to say that all of us were like, never thought of that, or that was a great visual to use with clients. So if some of our readers are interested in more information, or someone from an agency is interested in having you as a speaker, is that something you would be okay with putting your email in so that we could have them reach out to you?
Oh, sure. It's, my email is lawrence@lawrencecharris.com. And if that agency, school, whomever, even if you're just like, hey, I think, does this guy sell journals? Which, yes, I do. If
Okay.
somebody is looking for any of that, lawrencecharris.com or lawrence@lawrencecharris.com is my email address.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us today, Lawrence. I'm so appreciative and I'm very thankful that we get to have our first guest on the podcast. So very cool. We will also make sure to include all of your information about how to connect with you and where to find you in our descriptions. But that does it for today's episode of The Art of Divergence. I have been Sammy,
Heather,
Allie,
And Lawrence.
The Art of Divergence is created by Neurodivergent Ohio, our Ohio-based practice where we provide counseling, assessments, and community to neurodivergent folks of all ages. And you can find us at our website in the description as well. Thank you so much for listening, and join us next time.